Okay, everybody. Well, we at Sports Radio 810 WHB are involved in a fantastic organization and fundraiser that is coming up on Monday, October 5th called For the Kids. It's a golf tournament that our good friend Kevin Timmons from Nick and Jake's and some of his friends have been putting on to raise money for youth mental health awareness and some of the issues that go along with that. And Children's Mercy is obviously the main partner for the kids because they help us take care of our kids. And so to that end, we really wanted to dive into some of the issues that children are facing in today's world, adolescents, teenagers, and you might be like me and you might be a parent who has a lot on your mind when it comes to that. And it was already a big issue before COVID hit. And now we all know if we have kids that their lives have been turned upside down just like ours have. So the issues could be exacerbated by that as well. So to educate us on that a little bit right now, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, is Libby Milkovich. She's a developmental and behavioral pediatrician at Children's Mercy. Libby, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an important topic, and I'm really passionate about this cause.
Yeah, so you and I were talking before we started the interview a little bit. You're a lifelong Kansas Citian just like I am. You have kids, you told me as well. I have 3 kids. I'm relatively new to the parenting game. I've got a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-month-old. This stuff is really on my mind a lot. You study it all the time. As a parent, I before we even get into your profession, just as a parent, how much do you worry or concern yourself about this with your own children as they grow up?
Right. I think that's a really relevant topic. And as a parent, I know that I can control what is in my house, but what I'm really interested in learning more about is the environment that's outside of my house and how that shapes their mental health and how I can support the schools and other organizations in really supporting mental health. And so that's what is really driving my work, is knowing that my kids, so I have younger kids, they're not quite yet in school. And so really making sure that their environment as they leave the house is really set up for success for them.
I got to be honest with you, and we can maybe get into this a little bit later.
Yeah.
I worry sometimes about whether or not I can control the environment in my own house because, and I mean, that sounds like a joke, but when the kids
Right.
get on their computers, when they get on their devices, and we try to regulate that, but we probably don't do as good of a job as we should. Honestly, sometimes I'm not sure what's going on, what they're getting into. So it's like, it used to be your kids would leave the house and you didn't know what they were doing. Sometimes I feel like they're in my own house. And if I'm not spying on them all the time, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. Is that a common thing you hear from parents?
You are speaking my language. So I live and breathe tech and behavior. And so that's really what I'm focusing on, especially within the school environment, how tech is used. But that is an everyday conversation that I have in clinic about not only how technology shapes behavior. So we know that technology, increased use of technology is associated with ADHD symptoms, anxiety, depression, and difficult behaviors, but also the safety of internet use and how do we educate parents about keeping the internet safe, so that we don't have to be behind their shoulders and we feel comfortable and confident that we can teach our kids how to use the internet safely.
So how do you teach parents? Because I think I need a class. I think I need a whole course.
Well, that is so great. Well, actually, For the Kids is actually, and I work with another nonprofit locally called START, and they are a fabulous nonprofit that does webinars within for parents, teaching them about digital health, because it's really a complex conversation. Like we want to, when I, as a behavioralist, my number one concern is safety. So in a clinic room, I want to talk about safety. How do we put filters on? How do we make sure that what we're accessing, how children are using the internet is safe. So it's a number one concern, but then it's so complex because internet and technology is a great tool. It is creating relationships that never have been, before been possible. Kids who have been more isolated and have, maybe they're not the greatest sports players are now finding interest in coding and can really excel that way. So technology is a tool and it's part of our lives, but it's just using that tool. And so there are lots of resources, both locally and nationally, that can really help guide parents in really understanding how to use tech within their house.
Okay, so tell me again, what was the name of that, the program you and the For the Kids partner with?
Yeah, so it is called START. So it's an
Okay.
acronym. So it's Stand Together and Rethink Technology. Their website is westartnow.org.
Hey.
And on their website, they have, so a common question that I get is, when is it okay for my child to have a smartphone? Now, that is a very complex question. It's not like, oh, as soon as you turn 10,
Yeah.
you magically get a smartphone. It's more of a developmental, do they have this, does your child have the skills to use a smartphone safely? But what START does is really use the analogy of driving. So we teach our kids how to safely, or we are examples,
Mm-hmm.
how to safely use the tech and how to appropriately use the tech. Then one by, slowly we integrate them into driving. It's not like they turn 16 and you hand over the car.
Right.
So it's kind of a gradual process, but they have a wonderful handbook kind of guiding parents through that.
Oh, that's great. So
Mhm.
westartnow.org. I wrote that down
Yeah.
because that's something that I personally need. Now, to dive more into the conversation about For the Kids and what you guys are all about, let's get into some of the issues that are going on. Before the pandemic even hit, I know from talking to Kevin Timmons that mental health had been increasingly a bigger problem for the youth in America. Teen suicides are on the rise and all that. What, as you guys researched that, what were you finding was maybe the biggest? I don't know. It's probably too simple to pick one thing. So, what are
Right.
some of the things you learned about the state of mental health for children before we even got into this pandemic situation?
Right. So that is a huge research topic. Exactly what you said.
Mhm.
It's very complex. My niche in research is technology and how it shapes behavior. And so there's lots of theories about, with the rise of technology and the increased access over time, that coincided with the rate of increasing in, anxiety disorders, increasing suicide. Again, we're developing and understanding that relationship more because, as I mentioned before, technology is a powerful tool and can be used for very powerful things like even treating anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
It just, we need to understand it and use it and um, help parents and teachers understand how to use it so that it's more used for good as opposed to encouraging those more negative symptoms. Um, it's a very powerful correlation to look at those trends side by
Mhm.
side, to not say that there can't be a correlation related to those two.
Okay, so we have the correlation of technology, other pressures that children were facing. Is it safe to say this was an increasing problem even before the pandemic hit, just across the board in terms of mental health among adolescents and teenagers?
Yes, very much so, especially for our younger children. People traditionally think it's the older adolescents that are most at risk, but what we noticed in the most recent reports of suicide attempts is that the rate for the younger children, so elementary school age, had the highest increase.
Wow. And that
Mhm.
was before the pandemic hit.
That was before the pandemic. Yes.
Now, look, I realize that with the pandemic, everything is still basically being studied right now, the virus itself, let alone the outcomes of what's happened. But have you guys been able to? I mean, look, all of us that have kids, like I said earlier, their lives have been turned upside down just like ours have.
Right.
And so you see it, and we're all trying to figure out like what's the best thing for the mental health of our kids. Are you guys, have you had enough time to study and learn anything yet about how this pandemic is affecting our kids?
No, no, because over time that we can just learn from over time and over those patterns, but we are noticing it clinically. Um, and it is distressing, the multiple transitions that kids are facing regarding being in person, in school, out of school,
Hmm.
the increased anxiety that they're all experiencing through all the developmental spectrum. Um, it's really prevalent within our clinical experience.
So are there, so one of the things I know that For the Kids has really raised money for, and apparently it's getting more important because I understand the funding's been cut, for some of this is Children's Mercy having counselors who are there to help the mental health of kids in the Blue Valley School District, for example. What can you tell me about maybe the importance of their jobs and how much they can impact the lives of our children?
Their role is critical. What we know about mental health disorders are that early detection is critical in effective treatment. We know that children spend on average 180 days in school. So a lot of times teachers end up being the front line, the frontline person assessing for behavioral differences or mental health concerns, but they don't have the training to even though they have interest and desire, they don't have the training or the understanding of how to fully address that and get the child the support they need. So having school mental health professionals is critical in saving children's lives.
I mean, it makes sense because I try to put myself in the shoes of a teacher. Right. And that's a hard job right there.
Right.
You've got to know all the subject material. You've got to know how to communicate that material to your 28 kids in your classroom or whatever the case might be. Each kid is different. They all have different things they bring to the table. And you have to be trained just in the education part of it. That's hard enough.
Right.
Ask them to be mental health experts on top of that, when I'm assuming that the people that you have doing that have a lot of education in that specific field. So what's the need like? I mean, how far are we away from having enough mental health experts to take care of the kids that need it?
The need, I mean, there's never enough because, so I work closely with the Children's Mercy social workers that work within the schools. And although they're embedded in the school, there's still an increased need not only to help the kids that are at the highest need, but also to help the general student population. But additionally, the teachers right now need additional support too, because what they're going through is very stressful. But overall, there is not enough support in place for them.
Okay, so this is the appeal I'd like to make. If you're watching this right now, and on behalf of For the Kids, this is a partnership with us at Sporting Kansas City, or with us, Sports Radio 810 WHB. If the funding's been cut and the need is even bigger than it's been before, if you're an organization out there, maybe a small business, a big business, For the Kids needs your help, and they need sponsorships, and we have to try to step in and fill that gap to protect our kids. I mean, what's more important really than protecting the health of our children? And the mental health, we know, that's part of health. That's part of their safety and all of that. And again, if you're a parent like me, you have to be concerned about this stuff. It's something I think about all the time, and my wife and I converse about it all the time. And so to that, and I wanted to ask this of you, Libby, what should we be looking for in our own kids? And how do you get your kids to talk to you about, because how was your day? Fine. What did you do today? Nothing. Hey, what's on your mind? What's bothering you? Seems like something's bothering you. Nothing. It's all fine. Like, how do you get your kids to talk to you or talk to I don't know. What do you do? How do you, who do they have to talk to?
Right. And and that's a really wonderful question. So first I'm going to ask, how do you get your kids to talk to you? So what I recommend is with any type of behavior that you want your child to do is to model it for them. And so maybe you would start by sharing something good and something bad that happened to you today. And then have your child model it and just go around the dinner table and really capitalize on those opportune times to have those conversations. We also know that kids want adults to put down their cell phones. And so at all times, as much as you can, even though it might be hard, I admit it, I love my smartphone, but keep it down and be present when your child is there. So even if it's not a time where you think that they would be willing to contact, but you give the nonverbal language that you're ready to hear them. So those are kind of the two tips I'd really recommend to get your child to talk to you.
I like that. If I maybe show some vulnerability to my children and share with them some of my concerns or things that have me upset or worried, maybe that maybe free them up to feel like it's okay for me to share the same type of thing. Right.
Exactly. I always say the children are always watching you. They're watching you every step. And so we need to be really great models of the behavior that we want them to have.
Okay. Well, hey, Libby, look, we could spend a lot of time. I know you
Yeah,
spend
this is
hours and
so
hours
fun.
studying this every day. Well, it's just so important, right?
Mhm.
It's so important. Is there a message that you'd like to give to people, especially because right now, one of the things we really are trying to do is not only raise awareness for parents, but for people that can help out. How important is it, the work you guys are doing, and how much you guys need the financial support to take care of the different causes we just talked about in this interview?
Yeah, my work would not be possible without the financial support. And we have made incredible gains, but there are so many more gains to be made. And so it's really critical that we come together as a community to support each other and work together. And
Yeah.
so that's really how my work is done and how our work is done together.
All right. So if you're watching this again, folks, the chance to really impact some children's lives, save some lives in the process of what has been a pandemic even before the pandemic started. The mental health issue has been a pandemic basically for kids, and it's gotten even more dire because of what we're going through. So anything you can do to step up and help, we appreciate it. You can go to For the Kids. For the Kids is the organization. Libby Milkovich, developmental and behavioral pediatrician at Children's Mercy. Thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. Keep up
Yeah.
the great work, okay?
Thank you. I appreciate it.